Hello everyone! In this Python tutorial we are going to create a number guessing game. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a number variable that holds the value of the number to be guessed. Next we're going to create a string variable and assign a string, and this is going to be a multi-line string that gives the instructions for the game. We'll call this input string, and the instructions are going to say on one line enter 0 to exit, and then on the next line they're going to say, I'm thinking of a whole number between 1 and 100, what is it? Okay, so we have our number set, and a little bit later we'll show you how to create a random number to make this a little bit more of a interesting number guessing game. And note that one way to make a multi-line string is to use the syntax that you use to comment out larger pieces of code with the 3 quotes. Now let's start putting our code together that will make this number guessing game work. We're going to start out with a while loop, and we're going to say while true, which means this code will run until the criteria is met or we ask the program to stop. And one thing that is good to do when you're asking for user input is to try and anticipate some of the things that can be entered that will cause the program not to work. So in order to do this, we're going to use a try except statement that will catch some value errors if the user tries to put in input that is not valid. So let's start out with a try, and we're going to create a variable called user input, and we want the input to be an integer. So let's type out int, and then we're going to type out input, and then we're going to display our input string with the game instructions here. So let's put the input string in here. Next, we want to catch errors if the input is entered as a non-integer. So let's type except value error, and then display a message that says enter a whole number, no other characters allowed, or something to that effect. So let's type print enter a whole number, no other characters. We'll just leave it at that. So if they try and type in letters or decimal points or anything like that, this should return this error here. Now let's go ahead and allow this to continue. So let's just type continue. And now let's enter in a series of if-else statements to create the game logic. So the first thing we want to do is allow the user to exit the game if they want to stop playing. So let's say if user input equals 0, break out of the loop. Next, let's create an if-else statement that tells the user to make sure that the number is between 1 and 100 if they try to enter in a number larger or smaller. So we'll say else if user input is less than 1 or user input is greater than 100, display a message that says number must be between 1 and 100. Next, let's create some helpful hints for the player that tell them if their guess is low to guess higher, or if their guess is higher than the actual number to guess lower. So we'll use another else if statement. We'll say else if user input is less than number, display a message that says higher, guess again. And then another else if that says if user input is greater than number, display a message that says lower, guess again. Now finally, let's create another else if statement that says good job if the player guesses the actual number. And at this point we can break out of the loop and the game is finished until the player plays again. Now you could also put an else statement here, and you wouldn't need to necessarily state the criteria, but in this case we're just going to go ahead and use an else if and state the criteria. If the user input guess equals the actual number, which we've set here, go ahead and say yes, good job, and break out of the loop. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our code and test it. So the first thing we want to do is test the enter 0 to exit. So let's enter 0, and the enter 0 to exit worked. So that's good. So let's go ahead and run this again. Now let's test if the user enters a number that's too small. So let's put in -1, and this says number must be between 1 and 100. That's good. And it allows us to continue playing. Now let's test if a user or player enters a number too large. And it says number must be between 1 and 100. Okay, so that's good. The code that's checking to make sure that the number is between 1 and 100 is working. Now let's say that the player puts in a decimal number. They put in 4.2. And since the instructions say that the number needs to be a whole number between 1 and 100, this should give us a warning of sorts. And it says enter a whole number, no other characters. Okay? Now let's say that the player puts in letters like A, B, C. Again, says enter a whole number, no other characters. That's good. So it looks like most of our error checking is working. Now we can go ahead and try and play the actual game. So since we already know the number, it's not going to be quite as fun. And we'll go over how to use a random number for this here in just a minute. But let's go ahead and just start out with 1. And since the actual number is 22 and we put in 1, it should say higher. It does. Higher. Guess again. Okay. Let's put in 100. Lower. Guess again. Okay. Now let's start in the middle. 50. Lower. Guess again. Let's try 30. Lower. Guess again. And now let's put in 22. And hopefully when we put in 22, it should say yes. Good job. Okay. Good. Now, let's go ahead and change our string here because we didn't put in the number. Let's put in the number. Now let's play again. 22. Okay, good. So it says, yes, the number is 22. Good job. So let's clear our screen here and let's play again. But this time, let's put in a random number. So in order to do that, let's import the random module. And let's make this number variable a random integer between 1 and 100. So to do that, let's use the random module and let's access the random int. And let's put in 1 and 100. Now let's play the game again with the random number. So let's run our program. Let's start out with 1. Okay, the number is higher. Now let's go to 100, lower. Let's start at 50, lower. Okay, let's try 30, lower. Let's try 20, lower. Let's try 15, lower. Let's try 10. Okay, good. We get our congratulatory message. Yes, the number is 10. Good job. Okay, so that's it for this Python tutorial on how to create a number guessing game. We'll be doing many more Python tutorials in the near future. Please join us for those, and we'll see you next time.